Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Community Conversations with Prince George's County Memorial Library System. My name is Rebecca. I am the librarian 3 at the Greenbelt Library, and I am thrilled today to introduce a dynamic figure in our community, Whiskey Girl. Just a little bit about Whiskey. Hi, Whiskey.
Hi.
She is a really amazing poet and blogger. She describes herself as a Black girl storyteller, mental health, and women's advocacy, which is so important in the community, especially during the pandemic. She writes poems about the Black experience and how poor mental health manifests in Black relationships and community. She's also a self-published author, and you can actually book her for all kinds of speaking and performance events. Um, Whiskey, can you tell us a little bit about Whiskey Girl events?
Sure. There is, well, so many aspects of it. I started out as a poet, hopping around and doing open mics, and I wanted to do events to highlight creatives and also provide a space for myself to feature
Yeah.
myself. So now most of my events are just meant for a place for creatives to have a stage and freely express and feel safe, and also for people to understand that you can feel good and connect to your emotions and go through the gamut of all of these things in one event. So it kind of turned into like just enjoying curating a good party that's also tied to great art. So I started producing my own events, and I also host. I used to do a little bit of hosting for Busboys and Poets.
Mm.
And I run the gamut of having events where it's just feel good, it's a party. And I also have hosted things like For the Love of Our Men, where the men get in free and we discuss women's issues and topics in front of men so that they could hear our perspective. But right now, with COVID and everything, my main focus has been emotional support events. I have sister circles, virtual sister circles through my women's network. And the big thing is April 10th, I'm having a huge birthday show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's going to be live streamed for people who still don't want to go outside yet, but
Mhm.
it will be socially distanced and safe. It's a drive-in experience, actually. It's like going to a drive-in theater, but you'll see the stage show up on screen, and I'm having local R&B artists come to pack the show. I am hosting this along with Benny Black and our DJ Afu. So it's one big drive-in party to kind of, it's been a year since we've been in this pandemic, and it's
Mhm.
like I'm very big on joy and grief and all of these emotions swirling around. They can exist at the same time, and it's okay to tap into the happy ones too. So we're busting outside with a whole birthday show.
That is so awesome. And Whiskey, where can we find more information about you and your events?
Sure. The best place now is you can find me on facebook.com/whiskey girl DC. My Facebook page is actually where I'm going to have all of this stuff. It's the PG-13 version of me where I just repost memes about parenting and I talk about mental health and I share some poetry there. But it's really going to be the space where I keep all of my events, the virtual sister circles and this big birthday event. You can look up Whiskey and Friends at the drive-in and find it. And I recommend people RSVP to the event, even if they don't plan to attend, because I drop performance videos in there and fun facts about the other creatives in the showcase. And yeah, everything about it is a party. So Facebook at Whiskey Girl DC is the best place.
Awesome. I hope I'm invited.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I love a drive-in party, and I have been cooped up for a while, so I would love to get out and just like be around some awesome Prince George's proud people.
Yes.
Speaking of the pandemic, I'm curious about what are some of the biggest obstacles facing creatives during the pandemic?
Whew. I don't know how deeply I should get into this, but I do want to keep it real. I want to represent. I think the hardest thing was recalibrating how to move forward, especially for creatives that were more outward facing. We have an advantage being in the DMV area that there's plenty to do and there are plenty of events to be a part of. But when you shut down outside, it's kind of like, as a performance poet, as a DJ, as a dancer, how do you navigate this? So I think the major thing was determining how to recalibrate what your art looks like now, because you had a particular route for your art that is just blocked. So I think figuring out how to recalibrate and then how much time to take to nurture and care for yourself and realize that you are not realizing those dreams, taking time to grieve and then figuring out the timing of it, I think has been very difficult for creatives because you want to keep your name in the people's mouths. But you can't, but you also need to take the time to mourn what you thought your career was going to be. So I think that's what I've been talking to creators about, just being intentional about taking that time to themselves, and taking a planning time to redirect instead of feeling the pressure, because it ties into the second thing, I guess, that I find difficult for creatives during this time is that we are in a pool on social media, on the internet, with business people, with other people who are all regulated to this space. And it's kind of like we have to figure out how to move and get our art out there because we're being buried by celebrities who are also on Instagram Live. So how do you feel like it's the constant realizing that you're not competing, but we're on this internet pool, this social media pool that makes us feel like it's a competition. So the difficulty for me, and I think a lot of creatives, has been realizing that creativity is a gift that we're here to share, and it's not a competition. Even though it feels like we're in a cesspool of social media sharks, we don't have to have that desperation to get our art out. We just have to stay with the foundation of creating out of love.
Yeah, I'm a former artist myself. I used to be
Yeah.
a painter for most of my
Former?
life. Yeah,
You're never a former. You always are. It's just dormant.
yes, I'm hoping that I'll be like George O'Keeffe and come back and do my best work of my life in my 80s. But like, I know exactly what you mean, where it's just like you have that period where you have to really make space for yourself to feel like how things are different, that they didn't go exactly the way as planned.
Exactly.
But to me, you are a local celebrity. So I'm really excited that you're out there and that you're, still got your hustle on. So that's great.
Yes.
Now, I know that you are a mental health advocate, which is so badly needed in the community. What do you believe is the link between creative expression and mental wellness?
Oh my God, it's the direct link. Without creativity and creative expression, there is suppression. That's where, and it's been really cool to find because I kind of stumbled upon my journey into spoken word. I was just trying to blog, to release some things, and my foundation is writing. But there was something about being able to tell my story out loud, to say it, to speak it into my reality and existence, and to feel it and connect to my emotions. And I didn't realize that this work was happening in me internally, but then I started reading like Brene Brown and all of these books that you read, these self-help books that talk about releasing trauma, books that talk about connecting to your authenticity. All of these books they talk about the importance of creative expression. And even the books you read about being a better CEO, being a better mom, being a better this or that, a lot of them, the root is creative expression. There's that play. Adults don't allow themselves to play. And we build that anxiety in us, and we feel like we're always on this pressure and time cooker, and we don't release the things that we're taking in. We don't play. And creative expression is a form of play. So even though if you're a writer and it can become a torturous thing, But it is a form of play. It's an expression of freedom, and we're not always cognizant that we're not in a free environment. We do have laws and rules that govern us, and it doesn't mean it sits well with our spirit. It's just the laws of the land. So
Mhm.
what are the laws in the land of your imagination? You can be free here. So I think there's direct correlation. I think that is when you look at people who have who deal with issues of the mind, who struggle with connecting to their emotions, normally you can tie it to, where are you expressing yourself? Where are you saying what needs to be said? Where are you doing things that are fun for you, that release that inner tension that builds with everyday life? So absolutely, it is a direct correlation. Without creative expression, you will go insane. I
Mm.
stamp that.
Definitely. And I love how you're talking about like manifesting the joyfulness in your life. And it's so beneficial to the community because like you're making art for yourself and for your own mental wellness. And everybody gets to enjoy the fruits of that. And our community is enriched by that work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
In your opinion and experiences, what are some of the most important wellness needs of the Black community today?
Whew. Some of the most important wellness needs of the Black community, I think, are more safe spaces. I think especially in this area, especially in the PG County community, one of the richest Black counties, it's kind of like everyone feels like they have it together. And you have to project that you always have it together. And there's no safe space where people are like, I maybe don't have it together. And it's interesting, especially in the pandemic or when crisis arises, you see your community in line at the food banks. You see what the actual temperature of what's going on in the houses, with how we're carrying generational trauma, with how
Mhm.
we're dealing with alcoholism and abuse and all of these things. And we don't want to talk about it because we don't have the space, the safe spaces to talk about it. And it's just kind of, I think for our wellness, we need open communication spaces where we can be open and be ourselves. And I even tie that to nightlife community. I tie that to, I met these young ladies who said they were going to open a coffee shop in PG County where they want to bring artsy events. And I said, absolutely. Black people need more art. We need more safe spaces where we can express and be ourselves and not feel policed. We need more just space to be ourselves,
Mhm.
you know? And I think that's the major tie for wellness. And I think the catch is that we have to create these spaces for ourselves. We can't look to certain systems to fulfill these things. We can't look to other people to create it for us because it's never going to have the right vibe or temperature. But I think for us to focus on our wellness, we would have to take it at our own hands and realize that the reason we gather and build community and create our own events and safe spaces is because it's tied to our wellness.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know as a librarian, you know, my work is obviously very different, but
Mhm.
that's something that I personally, as a librarian, and I know I'm very proud that my system is so vocal about trying to
Absolutely.
understand how do we make space for the Black community? How do we uplift the Black community? How do we celebrate the Black experience? What can we do to dismantle the tools that are oppressing people? Because that's, as a library, that's our responsibility. We're not just a book house. You know,
Yeah.
we have to create spaces, create programs, create dialogue. And that's why I'm so excited that you agreed to talk with us today, because I view that as part of that work. So um,
Yeah, I'm
you
glad
do
to
a
have you.
you do a lot with women, which I'm really
Mhm.
interested in. Can you tell me about the WGB network?
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. So, um, well, it started with, this is a women's network for that I launched. That is basically creative branding is the foundation of it. I started my Whiskey Girl brand about 7 years ago, and I just kind of I realized as a creative starting out that I could base a brand off of me where it felt authentic, and I can plan it in a way that I can move in it, and I can talk about mental health, and I can also be the life of the party, and I can also talk about relationships and stuff. So I was able to build a brand that really encompassed my entire personality, and everyone, you know, my main feedback has always been like, oh, you're so authentic and it's so real. And I realized that with creatives, they learn to brand and market themselves the way an advertising team would. They base it on what's sexy or what's going on, the temperature of pop culture. And you don't have to do that. We are the foundation. Creatives are the root of art. So you base your art off of yourself. That way, everything you do reconnects you back to yourself. Everything you do is a reflection of what's happening in your life, and you can share your art without going insane because you're pretending to be someone else to be liked. So throughout my journey, I've had a lot of women come to me and connect with my art and want tips on how to do this. And as I started branching out and doing more and speaking and being here and here, I said, look, I can't be in the DMs giving women this advice and spending all this time with, you know, whoever reached out to me. So I part of streamlining it and also making sure that I'm dealing with women who are serious about taking themselves to the next level. I came up with the WGB network. And it's a member-based network where we do, and it's based on also just the realization that women are a force. And usually the thing that keeps women minimized is lack of emotional support. And there's something very powerful about having another woman look you in your face and validate your dreams. And I say this to everyone, validation is so important. We have to realize we are in an invalidating society. So it's literally a membership where you can come be loved on by other women, where you can talk about your projects, where you come free to our sister circles. We have, I know why the cage mom drinks, sister circles, for us to gather together and talk about the realness of motherhood and breaking down generational traumas. We have, we promote yoga, breath, meditation, because there's something about Black women specifically who have leaned into survival mode for so long that that's how we operate. But we operate better when we're present in our minds. So we have basically events and support groups, business meetings, and those kind of things to help us stay on track and help us feel supported. But also, it's a network. If I have a show and I can't make it, I toss gigs to the poets in the group. There are women who are vendors that sell food, that we have women who make body oil. So we're always networking and finding ways for them to branch out in the community. And we're amplifying the voices of women. If you give women that power, they're unstoppable. So it's just kind of like a home base for support. And, you know, I launched it 2 years ago, and I lost my job right after the launch, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And something told me to stick with it. And we just added 3 new members recently, and we're growing. And yes, I'm really proud of it. It's a place where women can come be imperfect. There are women who I consider us like we're the alternative business women. There's cannabis advocacy. There is a woman who she does makeup artistry, she does hairstyling, and she's also a dominatrix, and she has a really interesting story about her route there. So I think it's something for us to open up alternatives to how Black women are getting free. And once we open ourselves up to those stories, then we open ourselves to the experience of other people, and it cultivates empathy. So I'm all about the network, all about, yeah, it's been a really, really fun, cool thing.
That is just fantastic work. And like, we're just so lucky to have leadership like yours and empathy like yours and empowerment for our local women, and just like building up that space. I just find that so incredible. In fact, actually, if you are comfortable, I would love it if we could treat our audiences to one of your poems.
Oh, Absolutely. That is a great segue actually, because this poem I wrote years ago, and it's called Black Women Don't Cry. And it's really the amalgamation. When I was going through a really hard time in my life, I was very young, and I sought out the wisdom of older Black women. And I noticed, that's when I first started to notice the pain that we carry. And a little micro poem I have is the advice we give exposes where our pain lives. And I realized that about, if Black women don't heal and don't get serious about their mental health, then we carry this pain and we pass it down in our advice that sounds good, but it's not. So I wrote this poem as kind of an amalgamation of all the advice I received when I was going through a tough time in my relationship. And it's just interesting every time I perform it, how women are always like, yay, but if you dissect the words, it's kind of like, should we be operating like this? So this is Black Women Don't Cry. It's been a while, y'all, so I might be a little rusty. And I'll try to leave the curse words out. I think there's one or two. So they treated you like garbage, didn't care about your feelings, turned ghost when the walls closed in on you and toppled down your ceilings. Don't you lie in that pile of rubble, girl. Get up. Get it together. We don't have the luxury of shutting down or succumbing to stormy weather. And see, it's not just a bit of precipitation, it's a tsunami, strong enough to wipe out nations. But that burden is on you to lie in that bed. You wake up early every morning and you face it. You are a strong Black woman, able to handle anything. You don't need a man to help you raise a child or the false security of an engagement ring, but it doesn't matter. We'll leave you alone. Let you figure it all out. Learn and grow into your own power. Love who you want out of loneliness. Have a nervous breakdown in your own shower. Go to work, go to WIC, raise your baby, sucked his dick. Oh, you did this. It's your fault. You let Tyrone break your heart when you know that Black men lie. They get you pregnant. They say goodbye. Don't you cry. Your skin is coffee, mocha, latte, cappuccino. We as Black women give you this advice because we've been there, and we know that Prozac and that Xanax was not invented for you. You are so much stronger than those drugs. Get up and do what you have to do. You are welcome in our circle, but you better not shed one tear. We are low on society's totem pole, but do not complain about being here. Just look good. Stretch your big ass. Show dignity, strong faith in class, even as the world is telling you that you are not beautiful. You are a twerking hoe. You are just for show. Be kind to those people when they spit on you. Focus on your children. Don't be a love fool. And if you should fall into that trap, get up, dust yourself off, and bounce right back. You are Black. You don't suffer from their depression. Have you considered maybe you are just weak and you don't know real pain? You haven't earned a single tear falling downward from your cheek. I've been raped, called out my name, punched in the face, and I am not insane. I've used my life to make me tougher. You drown in sorrow and you choose to suffer. You wallow deep within your low self-esteem, claiming that you don't want to live anymore. We're all just biding time until we get to heaven, girl. Don't you even know what you're here for? Endure the crushing loneliness that comes with being set apart. Guard your heart. A romantic life is not meant for you. You better pour your love into those babies, because I've been where you are and there are no handouts. Who do you think was here to save me? I didn't pop any pills for my anxiety. I never bothered wasting time with psychotherapy. I did things the hard way, and guess what? I survived without once letting anyone ever see me cry. That's that piece.
Oh my God. That was amazing.
Thank
I
you.
can't even begin to unpack that. That was like a beautiful gem with all the facets of what it's like to be a Black woman in
Mhm.
this culture, in this society, in this current moment. And I'm just so grateful that you would shine a light on, the differences and the dynamics between Black women talking to other Black women.
Mhm.
And that to me just again reminds me of the work that you're doing, particularly to uplift other women, and how you are just creating a new cycle of goodness. And I,
That's the
I,
goal.
I feel like electrified right now. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for that performance. That was so wonderful and powerful.
Absolutely.
Um, now you talked a lot about motherhood in that poem, and I know that you have, the mother circle. I know why the cage mom drinks, which I think is
Mhm.
a fabulous title. So how do you balance motherhood, writing, entrepreneurial endeavors without overwhelming your own mental health?
Oh, yeah. Well, when you were stating the question, I was like, well, not very well. I, I give myself breaks. Self-compassion is a thing, and communication is a thing. One of the major things that I've been open about is that my mental health has not always allowed me to be a good mom. So I stumbled into creativity and self-expression, and I went too far with it. There was a selfish side to it, and I indulged in it. But through connecting to myself and learning what it is to actually love myself, I started to do the work of figuring out how to really balance my life and mental health. And I realized it came with integrity after just immersing myself in a bunch of bell hooks. She talks about integrity in the form of marrying the inner parts of yourself so that you're showing up in the world as you are in your inner world. And when I examined that, I realized communication was a thing. I need to have compassion on myself when I don't have time for all of the moving pieces. And when I find myself spiraling out, I need to communicate. I need to connect to my emotional support system. I
Mhm.
need to connect with the people, and not just in a way that's like, oh my God, I'm dumping on you, but in a way that's how can we validate each other and hold each other accountable and say uplifting things to each other? How do you connect with another human spirit? That's what we're supposed to do, foster relationships. And then the other thing is communication. I recently spoke to my daughters about, the way my lifestyle, our lifestyle is set up is that I am choosing to have, my art. I'm choosing to have this independent side of me where I exist outside of being your mother. And then I
Mhm.
also, because of economics, I have a 9 to 5 where I'm hustling there to put, food on the table. And then I am your mother who loves you, and I'm not always going to be here. We don't have a family unit with another parent to pick up the slack. So I have to communicate with them. I need space. I need to recharge. Mommy's not having a good day mentally. All of these things are just realizing that I can't walk around with this secret world of managing my anxiety. It's been about letting people in. And when I've let people in and just communicated about where I am, I've been very surprised how things have opened up. How many people they reply back with oh, don't worry about it. Or, oh, that pressure wasn't yours. You don't have to feel pressure about meeting this
Mhm.
timeline or doing this. So the more I guess stick to the foundation of spreading goodness, of being a mental health advocate, in being a mouthpiece to speak to the Black community, the more I stay grounded, I guess, in that foundation, the more I see I'm able to balance it all. It's just kind of like because it's tied to purpose, it works itself out. I hope that
Mhm.
continues to happen. I don't just completely burn out, but when times are rough, I use self-compassion. It's that mothering your inner child work where you're having a bad day, stop, rest, and pick up the pieces tomorrow kind of thing. So
Mhm.
it is a lot, but it's fun.
I mean that's really a wonderful message to to all women really,
Yeah.
but particularly to Black women and particularly to Black mothers. And I think that, I myself am childless, but I love children, and I am really just obsessed with the relationship between mother and children. And I think that it's really fantastic and important and critical that you are setting this bar, this example for your own children, to say, like, this is how you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Because too many of us as women, unfortunately, we were not taught that. We had to learn it on our own. So,
And as a byproduct, like motherhood never looked particularly fun. That's why I had so much resistance to it. But then when I reshaped it into realizing like, oh, I'm not here to control these little people. I'm here as a guidance, and all these
mhm,
lessons that I've learned, I can pass them down in love and be here as an emotional support for them. And that makes me enjoy it a whole lot more. And it is a really tough thing to teach little girls how to love themselves by example, because the world teaches you that loving yourself makes you full of yourself, and
mhm,
loving yourself makes you selfish. And so I have to find ways to be like, I look after me so that I can be better able to look after you. And there is accountability there where, my 9-year-old will check me and be like, you've been working a lot. What's going on? So there's a constant checking and balancing of it. But for the most part, I have to always push back against that rhetoric that your mom is going to dive into your life head first and just be all up in your grill until you're
mhm,
18. It's like, oh no, your mom is a whole woman and she's got a whole life,
mhm.
and she's gonna love and play and hang out, and we'll have our thing. But I want you to see how I live my life as a woman, so you know how to live as a woman when it's time to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, because the more confident that you get, the more you ride that wave.
Yeah.
And
The more people hate you.
but you're like a living map. You're just showing basically like, here's how it's done. And I just think that is so powerful and so important. So I'm super impressed. I'm sorry. um I appreciate you sharing all that with me, because that's not a space where I normally live, but
Yeah.
that is fantastic. Next question for you, and this is definitely germane to the times. How do you define wokeness, and how does it play a role in Black mental health?
Oh, so I definitely define wokeness as being mentally present. I define it, I think that especially our people, and when you look into psychology and how people process trauma, I do think, and especially as I have awakened myself, I didn't realize how much I dissociate. I didn't realize how
Mhm.
asleep I was. And it's coming to terms with these are tangible, I guess, terminologies that we're using. We kind of use it as like, oh, are you woke? Meaning like, are you adjacent to Black culture? And do you know about white supremacy? But it's really like, are you conscious? Are you mentally present to know that when you're at a work situation and someone is speaking to you out of their implicit bias? Do you know when someone is speaking to you or creating a tone that minimizes your power and your greatness? Are you aware of, when you walk in your own confidence, people who reject that because they reject it into themselves? Are you aware of the temperature when you walk in rooms? Are you aware of how you show up in the world? Are you self-aware and also aware of others?
Mhm.
It's literally present. And a lot of us, especially the Black experience, is I need a paycheck in this society that I did not choose to be in, but here we are. And
Mhm.
over time, I have adapted the wants and desires of the people who have brought me here. And in order to cope with how they treat me, there is a part of me that escapes. I escape into deep into culture. I escape into sometimes drugs and alcohol. I escape into positive escapes, Or I escape into my mind. I'm sitting in this meeting and we all have this thing where, you know, Black people, we speak amongst each other and we're like, we got to deal with this BS. And we all know what it is. And but in the moment you're dealing with it, depending on if you're at work or in a situation where you feel like you have to play the game, you can't assert yourself. We tend to dissociate. We tend to go a place in our mind where we can deal with these microaggressions daily. And waking up to it is really the practice of how am I really showing up? And I will say for me personally, I realized I didn't realize how much I used to laugh and be the bubbly one to assuage a situation where it's like, that's not my job to assuage a situation. It's not my job to make people comfortable in their wrongness or comfortable in their treatment of me. So it's the difference between, it's noticing those situations too, because we can dissociate so much or get used to it so much that it's just an oppressive feeling when you leave a meeting. It's the oppressive feeling of being at work or in environments where there's all white people and you feel like you're being watched. You can't be yourself. There's little microaggressions and comments being said. And we're so used to navigating in these environments that we're not present to it. It's an automatic thing. So for me, staying present and being woke is, no, I'm showing up Black and myself in this space, and I'm aware of every single element in the room that's trying to minimize my Blackness, and I'm going to maximize above it anyway. So for me, it's been a whole journey of looking into what wokeness is. And I think it's tied to, to adapt in this country, we've kind of gone inward and we've created a little pocket, but we need to blast it open and be like, we're here, we're present, we know everything that's going on, and we're able to call it out at the drop of a dime anytime. And we need that stance, the stance of I'm sitting up straight, my head is clear, I'm aware of what's happening. And if you continue this behavior, so,
F around
I have
and
a lot
find
of
out.
feelings on
Yeah. You're gonna find out. Yeah, that's real. That's real. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for breaking that down so lovely. And I hope that, when people are hearing what you're saying, that they are also ready to show up, take responsibility, and be present and empathetic, and just be a good human, no matter who you are. And the next question I have for you is, what are the main mental health side effects for Black people attempting to remain in a sense of culture and identity within white supremacist patriarchal society? I know that's a lot to unpack.
The main mental health side effects of, I would say, well, I'll just speak to kind of what I observe, or keep it fairly surface level. I think that we don't think about, and I was listening to this on a podcast with Brittany Cooper. She said the same thing. There's the correlation between Black health, Black physical health, and white supremacy and the patriarchy, and how that affects us is, I have explained before, said before, that we're in this land where we don't belong. We were brought here. And then if you're brought in a land under a contract of that you didn't sign, that's like you work for free and you are basically the same as an inanimate object, and we will treat you as such. But then the contract changes as slavery opens up, and it's like, but we're always functioning under a contract that we did not sign. That we in now that we're active in politics, it kind of gives the impression that we are signing these contracts, but it's also like making deals with the devil, because there's systems that do not appreciate us. And the gaslight is real. I think the identity is where it manifests, because we're being gaslit everywhere we go. You feel pain, there's white people, no you're not. You want to talk about this, no you don't. You want to, no you don't. And everywhere you go, there's someone telling you no. And we're in the 21st century, so it feels like, oh, get over slavery and Jim Crow laws, like you guys have risen way above that. But it's like, no, white supremacy has found a way to tell us no in the silent ways. It's found ways to whisper no's as we're walking the halls just towards something great. So it's the cognitive dissonance of knowing that you have greatness in you, that you have creativity, that you have ideas, and that you understand the American dream and how it could manifest for you. But everywhere you go, you're being told no. And everywhere you go, is this my dream or is this their dream? Is this my reality or their reality? The cognitive dissonance is real. It manifests in, coping to not lose your mind.
Mhm.
To operate in a world where there's, what's the opposite of privilege, like disprivilege, or to function in a world where people are in charge of creating your reality, makes you feel insane. I think we're having a
Mm.
mental health crisis within our Black community because we lean into things that give us identity, but it's just, does it connect to our souls? Our soul work is in danger. And you think about things, how Black women don't want to get into yoga because it's been kind of co-opted by white women, and it's like, we're the ones who need to be mentally present, like the
Mm.
world is yours, white women. Like, we are the ones who need to show up in this space, because being present is the thing that is going to keep us connected to ourselves and keep us in the fight of asserting who we are. Because a lot of times we come from a place of survival mode, and I don't think that's a healthy place to operate from. That's the body's triggered reaction, fight or flight. It's okay, we're going to get this done. But it really needs to be, okay, I'm here, I've seen everything. Let me not be reactionary. Let me be revolutionary. Let me
Mm.
write down, what the plan is, and then have a long strategic attack for how I'm going to show up in the world without losing my mind. The major way it manifests is that the constant reasserting of your identity, the constant holding on to your own identity, and fighting against the gaslight of white supremacy, in the gaslight of your peers. Adding on to that, being a Black woman, it's difficult because you insert the patriarchy. So there's this beautiful thing where we can unite with our men over certain issues, but then when you add in patriarchy, there's their split, because there's something in men where they have this privilege. There's a thing amongst Black women where we say sometimes, Black men are the white men of Black women. And it's been a longstanding kind of internal thing where we protect our men, but we're also looking for protection in return. But we're dealing with Black men who are being gaslit about how you're supposed to treat women, how community works, how you're supposed to show up in relationships toward women. And um, that's the further split. It shows up in the dysfunction in our relationships. It shows up in how we Black men are taught to function with their women in response to how white men treat their women. So we lose the culture that we had back in Africa, where women were revered, where there was partnership, where we're connecting to the soul of how you treat people. I think that the ugly thing about America and its origins is just that with white supremacy and patriarchy, it is the fumbling up of Christianity and people leaning into their own narcissism and interpretations of that to rule with an iron thumb and to create these systems that we're all screwed, and Black people are screwed the most. And
Mm.
it is just, it's manifesting in so many ways. But I think the major one is like the disconnect from our identities, and the disconnect and dysfunction in our, how it shows up in our personal relationships. There's too much emotional abuse, power struggles, and just disrespect for Black women, because that's the overall temperature of America.
Mm. Yeah.
I feel like I'm being so wordy.
No, no,
I'm very passionate.
I am wrapped by this because you're just basically breaking down what we all really fundamentally know. I feel like because we are all in a community together, and like some of us are trying to better understand these issues so that we can put in the work that
Yeah.
we should have been putting in all along. And it's really interesting to hear you also talk about relationships with men, And I was just curious about, like, does toxic masculinity have a feature within this white supremacy patriarchal um, nebula of mess?
Yeah. I don't even, I don't like the term toxic masculinity because going into deep healing work, I've realized how I've been toxic myself. And a lot of this is tied more to how the dysfunction in Black families and the dysfunction of what we've taught each other and how that shows up in unhealed trauma. So I think that it's more like conditioning. It's just negative social conditioning. It's
Mhm.
and just sorry, that's the side thing calling it toxic. I just hate that. Repeat the question because I got all into my
No,
sidetrack on toxic
no, thank you
masculinity.
for sharing that, because that's a perspective I really haven't heard of. I think that people have like glommed onto that phrase toxic masculinity to describe this umbrella of how the patriarchy affects men as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was just curious to see like how that ties into the oppression of the yoke of white supremacy. Is are men allowed to, you know, be themselves really ultimately, and how are we making space for them as well?
Yeah. I would say that there are a lot of things going on in our community, and I think the thing with the insidious thing about patriarchy is that it's a system so set in place that women have been complicit in it and also the main drivers of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think when Black women, one, I will say that these conversations are so controversial because we don't want to, you know, quote unquote, let the world know our problems or white people know our problems. But I think we're just in a space and time where we need to just get real about every damn thing. And when it comes to that, I think women, Black women especially, part of my work personally has been looking into how I've been complicit in it, how I was raised very traditionally in a Christian household where I thought that a man just comes in and shows up and protects and doesn't emotionally connect, and how we've kind of given men that pass because all we've been looking for is to just have a man. So by reducing men to just like a person who sits in the house and provides for you, or just a person who sits on the house in the house is just a trophy of look at me, I got a man, then we've been complicit in how we've dehumanized Black men and not allowed them to be free, because other than being a rapper, a basketball player, or somebody's dude, like what do we really value in Black men and how do we show that to them? I think that the I think it's tough because when it comes to mental health, the only real place where Black men can go for nurturing and for healing is to women.
Mm.
And because of that, it's upset the dynamic of our interpersonal relationships, definitely our romantic relationships. And the thing with Black men being oppressed by white supremacy, being seduced by the patriarchy, they're split in a very different way, because if they navigate life where they sell themselves a little bit, they can succeed within the patriarchal world. But they'll never succeed as far as white supremacy. They can only go
Mhm.
so far and high. But once you get so high into the upper echelons of these systems, you do so much selling of your soul, we lose our Black men there, or we
Mm.
lose them to the streets, or we, you know, there are very few systems put in place for Black men to be free, where they don't have to compromise their Blackness, their integrity, and they don't have to minimize themselves to sit in a room with white men who are intimidated by them, because Black men are also not allowed to be intelligent. It's almost one path that you can go. So
Mm.
it's just something that I really see the charge, especially after reading, getting into like Black feminist literature. There are two places you can go. You can go into hypergamy, and you can go into saying that Black men need to step up and overcome their toxic masculinity and get level with us, or we'll start dating outside our race and joining with people for their economic value. Or we can say, I'm in this with you, Black men, because these are the same traumas that I am suffering from. And we can't let these outside systems dictate how we are going to move in our community with each other. You are my brother. We're the same skin. Like we were brought here
Mhm.
under the same circumstances, and you have an extra layer. And I think it takes a deep loving and a deep healing for women to look at the power of the seduction of the patriarchy. That looks like a way out to certain men, because we're stuck here. We're finding ways to make it work for us. So for us, it's the understanding that to bring men back into the fold, in understanding why we need to dismantle these systems, is helping them to realize what emotional connection is and how that works. And we have a long way to go as far as rebuilding our nervous systems, managing the anxiety that we've been dealing with, naming it as anxiety, because that's what we've been functioning under the oppression of white supremacy and patriarchy. And I feel the charge that once women are working on that, then we can really start to plant the seed with men that it doesn't have to be toxic masculinity. You can just be free in your masculinity, and it doesn't have to oppress me. Please don't oppress me. We have enough of that going on. So yeah, I have a lot of really complicated feelings about that, but I think I've come to the conclusion that I understand the seduction that the patriarchy is, and I understand how, if we were brought over here and abused, how we were perpetuate that abuse and keep passing it down in these ways, and that the way men cling to women in relationship, in the way men seduce and emotionally abuse in relationship, it comes out of the same trauma that women are experiencing. So it's really just the leveling the playing field with empathy, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, thank you for shining a light on that, because that's a kind of an edge that I hadn't really thought about when we talk
Mm.
about toxic masculinity. And it's just, that I appreciate that, you're simultaneously like this beacon, like shining light onto the shadows of ignorance, which is wonderful.
Oh my God, you made me sound like a superhero. I'm
I
shining light on the shadows of ignorance.
You
I gotta
are a
use that.
superhero. You are a Prince
You're a
George's
writer.
County celebrity in my eyes. So I just am so grateful for the time that we have had. Um, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your point of view with us. And can you tell us a little bit as we close up, what's next for Whiskey Girl?
Oh my goodness. So what's next is a lot of things, but I'll say April 10th birthday show. I do want to plug that because it's one of those where if you buy tickets for the live stream, or if you pull up to the drive-in experience, the tickets directly go to the artists. So it's just a cool way to support local artists and get to see a fun show. I released an audiobook recently, and it's interesting. The audiobook is called The Refuse Mixtape, and it talks about the two meanings of refuse is trash, but also refuse. So
Mm,
it's just kind of like this overall look on love, and that although I've been treated like trash and I felt like trash when it comes to trying to experience love, I refuse to give up on it. So I have my audiobook project that is available on shop.whiskeyandpoetry.com. But mainly, that was me wrapping up this kind of era of my poetry. I've been doing this for about 7 years, and I've spoken a lot about emotional abuse and about how my romantic relationships have really been the root of my healing work, of me digging into what are the traumas I have that keep attracting certain kind of relationships. How is my low self-esteem playing out? That kind of thing.
mhm,
And I met my poetry homie. Shout out to Ak. He introduced the missing link to me, which was we feel this way and function this way because of white supremacy in these systems. This has been the burden or the feeling that has caused, the mental health, along with other things, right? So the new direction of my art is really to talk more about that. It's really about after the healing. Before,
Hmm.
I always specialized in the deepest part of healing, the hard part that people try to skip over, the painful part.
Mm-hmm.
But now I see what it is to emerge out of that, to love higher, and to express higher and be higher. So I'm really, one thing I did was I opened up a Patreon so that as I'm going through this healing process and immersing myself in feminist literature,
Hmm.
the art that I'm creating as a result of that, I'm allowing people in. So I have patreon.com/whiskey girl dc is where I have people who can subscribe and pay like a monthly fee. And for as low as $3 a month, I share blog posts where I talk about just being a single mother. I talk about what it is managing my mental health. And I also share micro poems in the art that I'm starting to create in this new mindset of what it is to live outside of depression, what it is to own yourself and assert yourself as a Black woman in these societies, and how it looks to show up where you won't allow yourself to be minimized or invalidated. And I fully expect to like lose my job and run into a bunch of obstacles,
Hmm.
but it's worth it to get to a point where you're willing to die for your freedom, because freedom is freedom in your mind. And that is so important. And we've been walking around unfree and put in places where we're meant to be okay with it. So now the depression was and I read this somewhere, depression is your body fighting against something that's wrong. It's your body alerting you that something's not okay. And I really feel that. I went through my depression and my dark ages that rises up and kind of lets me know that this is not how you're supposed to be treated. And part of coming out of that depression is coming out of oppression and allowing
Hmm.
myself to be free. And now that I've had this freedom, yes, I'm standing on it and I am willing to
Hmm.
die for it. So all of the revolutionary and like the return to feminine stuff, just feeling at peace in my body and at peace as a woman, and leaning into femininity and that kind of thing. All of that stuff is the new wave for where I'm going with my art. But the main thing is the April 10th birthday show. I'm doing a full stage performance, awkward dance moves, poetry. It's gonna be fun.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much
Thank
for your time
you.
today. I appreciate you just showing us how it's done.
No, I
Um,
don't know about that.
I hope that we can have you back maybe to talk again sometime. Again, thank you, Whiskey, so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. We'll see you at the library.
See you at the library. Bye.